The Giannis thing is interesting because I don't think he's going to win, but I think he's the MVP this season. And I, the more I thought about it and the more I tried to talk myself out of it, I just couldn't do it. He's the MVP. He's the best player on the best team. Best win percentage of all three of these.
The Giannis thing is interesting. Last season, the MVP race was as closely contested and as highly debated as any other MVP race in the recent NBA history. But there was something about this MVP race that felt missing. The former two-time MVP and one-time Defensive Player of the Year, Giannis Antetokounmpo, was being completely overlooked in the MVP race. You could tell Giannis had a big problem with that after he came out and made a comment like, "I'd be tired of myself too."
I couldn't vote for Giannis ultimately because his free throw shooting from last year was down. His three-point shooting from last year was down. His blocked shots from last year were down. Assists, down. Games played, down. Oh, wait a minute, I did find one where it went up. Turnovers were up.
I think Jokic and Embiid are going to split a lot of those first place votes. The award will be determined by who gets more second place votes. That's what's going to be interesting. Now, for me, it's Joel Embiid.
Embiid not playing impact your view on the MVP race at all? Prior to going in, I don't know where you were at. I kind of had Embiid slightly ahead of Joker, okay?
It's not the fact that Jokic and Embiid were favored above Giannis for last year's MVP. It's the fact that the vast majority of people chose to ignore Giannis in the MVP conversation as a whole. Going back through all the numbers, the stats, both second and third level, and all the analytics, this might be a first in the history of the NBA. In any other season, or during any other era, Giannis would have ran away with the MVP award. But you see, what's operating here between the lines isn't all black and white. This isn't just entirely about last year's MVP, and I'll tell you why. Actually, there's a ton going on here that has been manifesting itself for several seasons. People don't understand how to evaluate the game's best player. Allow me to explain. See, Giannis, just a couple of seasons into his NBA career, began drawing comparisons to a guy like LeBron James. This proved Giannis' early potential and what people thought this kid could actually become. But here's the deal. Giannis wasn't a lottery pick. He wasn't entering the NBA as a high draft pick, and no one thought he would be this good, especially with someone like LeBron in the league, who was definitely the best player in the NBA at the time. While a lot of players come into the NBA looking to take on their idols and showcase themselves, Giannis' story was a little bit different. See, Giannis didn't even enter the United States until 2013. This meant that, like most kids overseas, he was watching LeBron James, and all he could ever do was sit and dream about becoming someone like LeBron one day. That's why Giannis said, "Coming to the league, I never saw myself as one of the best players in the league or being that LeBron type of player." That's the truth. Could say, yes, I always thought I could be like LeBron James or better or whatever, but that's not the truth. Look, back in 2007, LeBron led Cleveland to the finals and arguably became the best player in the NBA. Giannis, meanwhile, was a 12-year-old kid watching in Greece, probably in awe of what he was witnessing. So, with a player that comes from a foreign background like Giannis, his mindset was naturally different from what people were maybe expecting. And when fans and pundits kept exerting this pressure on Giannis with comparisons and making him out to be something he felt like he wasn't ready to be, it's what led to Giannis saying, "A lot of people can say that I can be the face of the league. I cannot be the face of the league because I'm not American. I don't have the American culture in me." It was all about his mindset. Clearly, he was in a different mental limelight because of his upbringing. Again, it was just over a decade ago that he first arrived in this country. But people weren't realizing this about Giannis when he was here in the US. And that's why Giannis said in an extremely shocking statement that he seriously considered retiring from the NBA in 2020, saying, "Everybody, no matter where I am, is watching me. I don't think I have the time to turn it off, to be myself, kind of just be me." In 2020, I was ready to walk away from the game. And very normally, everybody is looking at me like I was crazy. You just signed the largest contract in NBA history, and you want to walk away from the game and all that money? But see, Giannis didn't start feeling this way in 2020. It didn't happen out of nowhere that he considered retiring in 2020. But this story does paint the picture of who and what Giannis became over the years and the trajectory his career followed a little earlier in his career. Giannis said himself that the rise to stardom got to him. If we flash back to a couple seasons ago, this narrative about Giannis was that he was this super freakish athlete with force and power only to be rivaled by Shaquille O'Neal. And early in his career, whatever Giannis did, we watched and marveled at his greatness. If he didn't win or didn't play well in bigger games, no one took issue because he was just a young star on the rise. But the criticisms of Giannis grew when he began making a name for himself as the league MVP. And in 2019, Giannis entered another dimension. He averaged 27.7 points, 12.5 rebounds, and 5.9 assists per game, while leading the Milwaukee Bucks to their most wins since the 1971 season. And by the way, he recorded the highest PER since LeBron James in 2012. And when it came to postseason time, it looked like Giannis turned yet another page in his book when he came out in the first 2 rounds and dominated, leading the Bucks past the Pistons and a stacked Celtics team led by Kyrie Irving, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. But then Giannis and his Bucks took on the Toronto Raptors in the 2019 Eastern Conference Final, and it all changed. That's the series that started the entire talk about how teams could just quote unquote build a wall anytime they play the Bucks, since Giannis is such a lousy outside shooter and can't do much else when you block off all the lanes to the basket. This exposed a glaring weakness in Giannis's game. And since the Bucks lost in such horrible fashion, dropping 4 straight games to lose the series in 6, the critics came after Giannis, calling him a fake MVP, overrated. In the following season, Giannis had to prove the haters wrong. So he and his Bucks were on pace to win over 70 games before the pandemic struck and cut the season short. Giannis fell short again in the 2020 bubble against the Miami Heat, in a series in which Giannis again looked levels below what he was during the past 2 regular seasons. But before we go deeper into that segment of Giannis's career, this was another notch that convinced even the staunchest Giannis stans that he was indeed a flawed player who wouldn't ever win it big in the NBA. These narratives drove home the point that Giannis is a choker and isn't a winner at the highest level. Something had to be done. Either Giannis's career would take a turn for the worst, or something else would have to give. But what happens next will shock you. See, when you rise to superstardom out of nowhere, there's a level of jealousy and hatred that follows you. And all the people who want to see you fail are on your tail 24/7, waiting for you to make the smallest mistake. What people were overlooking was the fact that Giannis, he was still pretty young. We're talking about an MVP, an NBA Defensive Player of the Year, before turning 25 years old. The only other person to do that was the undisputed NBA GOAT, I'm just kidding, Michael Jordan. And even if you look at other NBA greats like Kobe, KD, Steph, Shaq, LeBron, and even MJ, none of these guys were winning individual accolades and leading their teams to 60 plus wins with conference finals appearances at 25. Even Shaq once said that he believes Giannis, at only 24 years old, was better than Shaq was at the same age. Hearing that come out of the man who many call the most dominant player in NBA history, I don't know about you, but I'm taking that statement to the bank. But here's another thing. People praise Shaq like there's no tomorrow for being so dominant and so scary on the low block. He would literally terrorize people using his brute strength. Yet, when Giannis terrorizes defenders using his strength, length, and athleticism, too many times he gets dismissed as someone with no bag. Why is it that Shaq is beloved, but Giannis catches wild criticism? Why is Giannis dinged for dominating the game in a similar way that Shaq did? The last time Giannis won MVP in 2020, I have to admit, I was pleasantly surprised. Not because I thought Giannis shouldn't have won, because he clearly deserved to win, but because I thought the runaway media narrative of LeBron's comeback season and how he was playing his best season ever in his 17th season would have been enough to win the award that year instead of Giannis. While LeBron absolutely deserved to be commended for how insanely well he was playing in this 17th season, had it been anyone else besides Giannis as the frontrunner, the media would not have even acknowledged LeBron in the discussion. Just look at Giannis' season side by side with LeBron's. This season right here, put together by a 25-year-old reigning NBA MVP, is one of the greatest individual seasons that this game has ever seen. Giannis became the first player that season to win the MVP and Defensive Player of the Year in the same season. It's been decades since Michael Jordan pulled it off in the late 1980s. But then again, the bubble happened and the season restarted, and the Bucks, led by Giannis, disappointed, leading the media to not even consider Giannis in the preview for the following season MVP race. But little did they know, the following NBA season would be the biggest slap on any hater's face. And Giannis was ready to set out on a mission to end all the doubts about him. With an average of 28 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists per game, Giannis's numbers screamed MVP during the regular season, yet again. But Giannis was not even being mentioned in the MVP race. But it didn't matter, because it was in the playoffs that he turned into an absolute terror, with the entire world waiting to see how he'd respond with his reputation as a playoff underachiever and choker. But with a playoff stat line featuring 30 points, 12.8 rebounds, and 5.1 assists, the term dominant seemed too humble. Giannis was showing up in a big way. He went into the 2021 postseason with a chip on his shoulders and reeled off one of the greatest postseason runs by any player ever. And best of all, he capped things off with the NBA Finals trophy and the Finals MVP with an outstanding game, dropping 50 points in a closeout game of the NBA Finals. Just 2 seasons after they, quote, built a wall, and 1 season after Giannis officially was crowned as the expert playoff choker, the Greek Freak was now an NBA champion. Through all the ups and downs, all the criticisms, and the premature narratives written about Giannis, he stood tall through it all, even if it reached a point when he thought about retiring. But the truth is, Kobe Bryant saw it coming before any of us did. Back in 2017, before Giannis was an MVP or even thought of as one of the top 5 or 10 players in the world, Kobe saw something in this 22-year-old kid that others did not. He saw something special. Yes, he was a world-class athlete, and he could do things and achieve things on a level that no other player in the NBA could. He was even the first player since LeBron James in 2008-2009 to lead his teams in points, rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks for an entire season. But what Kobe really saw was the Mamba mentality. So when Giannis asked Kobe for his challenge, he challenged him to go win MVP. Like many things the late Kobe said, this tweet aged pretty well. And speaking of age, he's only 29 years old. He has a superstar by his side for the first time in his career in Damian Lillard. He's at the peak of his basketball powers. Giannis still has so much left to uncover in his career. But with all he's already been through and all he's already been able to achieve, there's officially nothing this man can't do.